Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth clarified comments he made that he said it's unrealistic for Ukraine to have pre-2014 borders and become a member of NATO. Let's take a listen.
Everything is on the table in his conversations with Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. What he decides to allow or not allow is at the purview of the leader of the free world, of President Trump. So I'm not going to stand at this podium and declare what President Trump will do or won't do.
Let's bring in Sabrina Singh, who served as Deputy Pentagon Press Secretary during the Biden administration. Great to have you here. You have been on the inside as you watch from afar now as someone who served President Biden and Vice President Harris. What do you make of the ramifications of what Secretary Hegseth has said?
Well, look, we saw Secretary Hegseth walk some of his comments back from the previous day, but I think some of that damage is done. When you're saying and you're broadcasting to the world, to Ukraine and to Russia, that NATO membership is off the table, look, that is a huge bargaining chip at the table for Ukraine. That's something that's very important to them, something that they've made very public, and something that, you know, the previous administration said while NATO membership is not for today, it's for a long term, that was something to work towards. So to take that off the table, I think, does tremendous damage, not to mention some of his comments about, you know, sending in a non-NATO force, but not to secure Ukraine and to ensure peace, but not honoring Article 5 potentially. I mean, that sends a lot of ramifications to our allies, and you're seeing that play out at NATO. There, you know, even one of our closest allies, Germany, the Minister of Defense, saying that those comments that Secretary Hegseth made are just not helpful. So it's really concerning.
If the United States were to walk away from funding Ukraine, supporting its effort against Russia, are there other nations in Europe or elsewhere who would step in to the fray, or would Ukraine essentially be on its own?
Well, Ukraine wouldn't be on its own. Under Secretary Austin, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, it still is intact. It was chaired by the UK. There are many countries, over 50 countries, still sending aid to Ukraine, security assistance. So Ukraine is not standing alone. But if America walks away from Ukraine, we're turning our back on a sovereign country that was invaded by Europe's largest army, or largest military. What kind of message does that send? What kind of message does it say we're not going to stand up to bullies on the world stage? I think that does tremendous damage to America's reputation, not only on the world stage, but here at home. So look, Ukraine's not going to stand alone. It's in Europe's best interest if Ukraine continues to fight this war and fight these battles and continue to take back their sovereign territory. But if America does not, if the United States walks away from the table, I really think that not only hurts Ukraine's chances at continuing to claw back their territory, but again, it's the message that you're sending to our allies and partners in the world, the damage that it does to our reputation. I think we really have to think about that as a calculation when it comes to Ukraine.
When I was on Capitol Hill recently, it's evident based on my reporting that President Trump's not out on a limb on Ukraine when it comes to his own party.
No.
There's not a ton of fervent support for further funding in the GOP for Ukraine. What's the explanation for that? We all remember 2022 when Ukraine was attacked. That seemed like almost everyone in Congress was wearing a Ukrainian flag on their lapel, but that seems to have fallen away. Is there any way for Ukraine to recover a bit of the support among conservatives and Republicans and others?
Well, look, I think what you're seeing from conservatives on the Hill is certainly the calculation of the war in Ukraine and continued U.S. support that does cost money, that does cost military assistance to go towards continuing to send some of those capabilities to Ukraine. That being said, I have to remind you that there is also bipartisan support in both chambers from Democrats and Republicans to continue to support Ukraine. So I think it is important that Congress passed a bill that allocates money for the Department of Defense to continue these, you know, what we call presidential drawdown packages to allow military assistance to continue to Ukraine. I think there are Republicans in Congress that see the benefit of Ukraine fighting this war rather than drawing Europe and potentially the United States into a war and invoking Article 5 should another European country be attacked by Russia. At the end of the day, Ukraine fighting this war is just more cost effective than Europe and the United States being drawn into a war. So there is bipartisan support in Congress. I think Ukraine continues to make their case on the world stage. And they're having those conversations with this administration as well.
Sabrina Singh, thank you for coming by. We appreciate it and your
Thank you.
perspective.